The simple, handy acronym that I use to incorporate pathos into what you're talking about, bring emotion into what you're talking about, is SHARP. So 5 letters, SHARP, spells the word sharp. Think of it as sharpening your pitch.
Okay.
All you do is, and you're already on the S, story. Use a story to get your audience drawn in, hooked, interested in what you're talking about. We love stories. We
Mhm.
rewatch, re-listen to stories where we know what's going to happen. Our brains are hardwired to engage on story. It's so funny when you walk into a room where a presentation is happening and someone might be talking about data, talking about statistics, and everyone else is clearly otherwise engaged, right? They're not paying attention until someone starts to tell a story. And then suddenly you see people look away from their devices. They
Oh, yeah.
engage, they're interested because stories draw us in. So think
It's
about
so
how
good.
you can frame your recommendation in the context of telling a story or giving a story about why what we're talking about is important. It doesn't have to be really long, it doesn't have to be drawn out, but a story is a great way to get people hooked or interested. So that's the S in sharp. The
Okay.
H is humor.
Oh,
Now, the trick about humor is you've got to really know your audience, right? Because it's really uncomfortable if you tell a joke that you think is hysterical and they don't think it's funny. Or you're not telling a
awkward.
joke. You're not telling a joke and they start laughing and you don't know what to do with that either, right? So humor is a tricky one. I will say that up front. But if you really think through how your audience might react to you or just want to kind of break the ice, bring in humor, if you err on the side of caution here and
Yeah.
use humor that you're certain won't be offensive. If you don't know your audience, then avoid this. If
Right.
you know your audience pretty well, then you can bring in humor. The last in-person workshop I did was with a group of executives. They were pretty senior in level. And when I came in the room, I noticed that there was no one sitting in the front. Everybody was in the back. And I made a joke about how familiar this felt to the classroom in with the students, right? And it was, they laughed and chuckled, and I promised I wasn't going to bite anyone or make anyone uncomfortable. But just you lighten the mood, you make people feel better when they smile or laugh. And so when you can bring in humor, that does, that if it's appropriate for the audience and the context, it can be quite effective.
Love it.
A in sharp is analogies. So an analogy is to essentially say that something is like something else, to make a point that explains what you're trying to say. A famous analogy from a movie, that the movie Forrest Gump, is life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Now, if you buy an assorted box of chocolates, you have to bite in to figure out what flavor it is. And so the idea here is when you give someone an analogy, you're helping them see something that they might not have made a connection between, right? Box of chocolates and life would not have necessarily thought of those two things together, but with that analogy you can see how they relate or how a point is made more clear instead of just saying the unexpected happens in life. Another way to just bring in some emotion to kind of switch up or add color to what you're saying is just to bring in an analogy.
Yeah, I saw one of these done recently, so simply but so effectively. It was what someone, it was talking to tech investors and saying, we're on this, what may just be an AI bubble, don't get too excited. And then his analogy was simply, it might just be like 2007. And a tech investor would remember what happened in
Yes.
2007, would remember that bust. And I thought, what an effective, fast, simple, but really clear analogy.
Yes, yes, love it. And the next one in Sharp is pretty similar to analogies. It's references. So the R is make references, right? So you can refer to something that's familiar to the audience. I joked, a student asked me once about, they asked me, do we really need to read your emails, Professor Lovelace? And I said, right, yes, that question was asked. And I said, absolutely. I only send you information I really want you to know in an email. So don't treat my email like an iTunes user agreement. And they all laughed, right? Because we've all done this, right? We get these long pages of legalese that we scroll through. We don't even read it. We don't prepare. We just scroll to the end, click the box, and then say yes. We have no idea what we've signed away.
Right.
And we just carry on with our lives. And I said, don't treat my emails that way. Do not treat them like a user agreement. Read what I'm saying and then move on, right? And I will try to
Love
make
it.
sure it doesn't read like an iTunes user agreement. And
Fair.
so that was but that's a reference that my audience got. They chuckled about it and then we moved on from it, right? But it's a way to
Yeah.
make a connection with the people you're talking about and it brings out emotion.
Yeah. Okay. P. I'm excited to hear about P.
P, last but not least, pictures. Can you give us a
Oh,
visual of what you're discussing, right? Is there a literal picture you can show? If not, you can use vivid words to paint a picture. But whenever you can give someone a picture, right? We see these quotes like a picture is worth 1,000 words or something like along those lines. You save so much time and energy in explaining things when people can just see it. And so if you can give them a visual, give them a picture of what you're talking about, you are engaging pathos.